Welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. I'm Tim.
I'm Tommy.
And we are starting Mark chapter 11 today. So we've come a long way. We're well over halfway into the 16 chapters of Mark. Today we're in chapter 11 where Jesus is going to enter Jerusalem. We're kind of getting to the end of his ministry here.
Getting to the good stuff.
So thanks for being with us. We're going to go ahead and just jump right in here. We're going to read verses 1 through 14 to start. And as they approached Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord has need of it,' and immediately he will send it back here." They went away and found a colt tied at the door outside in the street. And they untied it, and some of the bystanders were saying to them, "What are you doing untying that colt?" And they told them just as Jesus had said, and they gave them permission. They brought the colt to Jesus and put their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. And many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches which they had cut from the fields. And those who went in front and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest." And Jesus entered Jerusalem and came into the temple area. And after looking around at everything, he left for Bethany with the 12, since it was already late. On the next day, when they had left Bethany, he became hungry. Seeing from a distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if perhaps he could find anything on it. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples were listening. All right. So, Jesus and his disciples are eating in Jerusalem. They've been here before. This is a yearly thing. But this journey was different, right? There was something else happening here. And so Jesus has his disciples go grab a colt, which to ride in on a colt is a sign of coming in peace. Jesus was not coming as a conqueror to capture the city, but as the Messiah offering reconciliation and peace, right? And this entry was foretold or discussed in Zechariah 9:9.
Yeah, and this goes, the disciples, we've talked about how the disciples were thinking that he's building this kingdom and it's going to be on earth. And, everyone has been expecting this Messiah to come in with the white horse and take over Israel and to defeat all the bad things and to make things good. Mm-hmm. And he comes in riding a little donkey,
Yeah, peacefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people at that time thought the Messiah would show up in might.
Yeah.
So the prevailing thought of the people in Israel at that time was that if Israel was unworthy, then the Messiah would arrive lowly, like he did.
Yeah.
If they were worthy, he would show up in might. The problem is, more often than not, they thought themselves worthy, so they overlooked what was lowly.
Yeah.
And isn't that a great lesson for all of us?
Yeah.
Right? So then as he enters, the people are celebrating. They cry out, "Hosanna." Jesus spent most of his ministry asking people not to declare who he was or to celebrate him, but this time he kind of goes out of his way to allow it.
Yeah.
Right? So they come into town, and to me it's just kind of funny. They come in with all this fanfare. They get there, it says, he looked around for a bit and said, "All right, let's go, it's late."
That's one part of this I never I guess I never realized. Like, walks in, like, "All right, let's go."
I did what we came to do. Let's go home.
We filled that prophecy's been filled.
That's
next.
Right. For some reason, it gives me the image of like going on vacation with your parents when you're a kid and you get there really late and it's like, well, let's just go have a look real quick and then we'll go home. Yeah. And then we'll go to bed.
There's the Grand Canyon.
There it is.
All right, back in the car.
All right. Yeah. All right. So after they arrive, he looks around, he leaves for Bethany, and on his way, this is where he encounters a fig tree with no fruit. He curses it, and Mark makes note that the disciples heard him do so. So this is going to come up again later in the book of Mark. I think it's important to note here that it refers to the fig tree as having it was in leaf, but then it bore no fruit. So that is a analogy for maybe the people of God at the time.
Yeah, I think that I looked into this a little bit more as we were preparing for this, and there is a lot of symbolism here that this curse was a kind of a curse of Israel, in that they should be doing this. This is God's holy land, and there should be fruit, and there should be be fruitful and multiply, as God said. And there's all these leaves, all this kind of cool looking stuff. Looks like it, but there's really nothing there.
Yeah, you could almost say that they look worthy, but they're not.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, again, a great lesson for us to consider.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's go now to 15 through 26. Then they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple area and began to drive out those who were selling and buying on the temple grounds. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple grounds. And he began to teach and say to them, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard this, and they began seeking how to put him to death, for they were afraid of him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And whenever evening came, they would leave the city. As they were passing by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. And being reminded, Peter said to him, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered and said to them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them, and they will be granted to you. And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you for your offenses. But if you do not forgive, neither will the Father who is in heaven forgive your offenses." All right. So, Jesus comes in, and he starts flipping tables. It always, there's that meme that goes around on social media that says, when asking what would Jesus do, remember flipping tables and, casting a whip are, those are things that he did.
Yeah.
It's also then important to remember that you're not Jesus.
Yeah.
Just because Jesus did something doesn't mean you get to do it as well. But what's happening here, right? So, why is he flipping the tables?
Right.
I think this is really the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in the temple area, and people are selling what were approved sacrificial animals, but they did it at a marked up price. The money changers were there to convert money. So Jewish men had to pay an annual temple tax, but it had to be paid in their specific currency. So the changers would charge people to exchange their money to the proper currency. So if it's like, okay, well, you have Canadian currency and I have American currency, so I'm going to go ahead and convert your Canadian currency to American currency, because obviously the American currency is a holier currency, obviously. But I'm going to charge you 10%, 20%, 30%, right?
Yeah.
So now, just to give my offering to God, I have to now pay you to do that.
Right.
Right. And this is what is angering God, right? These are examples of people who are profiteering off the worship of God. So this isn't to say that you can't make money in the service of God, but this is more like extortion and religious manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. This is why he calls them thieves. It's not because they needed to get a payment. It's because of the way in which they did it and how they set it up.
Yeah, and not only were they doing it, but they were doing it in the temple courtyard.
Yes.
Which was, you think about it, this is supposed to be, it's not the holiest of holies, but this is a holy place, and this is where people come to pray and to worship and to offer sacrifice, and there's no difference between it and the market outside.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, this is as far as the Gentiles could go.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where the Gentiles had to pray and worship.
Yeah.
and they're trying to pray and worship. Imagine being at a church service, and while you're trying to worship, somebody's
Popcorn,
Yeah.
peanuts, Cracker Jack. Yeah.
Exactly. Get your communion cups over here.
Yeah.
And you can't worship.
Bibles, buy one, get two free.
Right. You can't worship because all of this, triviality, all this profiteering is going on.
Yeah.
When the focus should be on God.
Yeah.
Right. So they were literally disrupting this house of prayer. And Jesus says it. Look, this is supposed to be a house of prayer for all the nations, or, AKA the Gentiles, but you've made it a den of robbers. So I think it also shows you just how special sometimes God's chosen people saw themselves.
Yeah.
And I get it. They're the chosen people, but God is for everyone, right?
Right.
And he had ways to bring everybody in. And he had given them a command to allow the Gentiles to come worship him.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right. So then as they leave, they pass that fig tree again. And Peter points out that it's withered at this point, and Jesus explains that, hey, if you believe what you're praying will happen, then it will happen, right? And this is where he talks about throwing the mountain into the sea. Now, when we read 1 John 5:14 through 15, we see additional language, things like ask according to his will. So when we talk about, we've said this on this podcast before, but I can't just walk out and say, just because I believe that God will throw that mountain be thrown in the sea, but I also have to care about what his will is, and what his desire is, and he's not going to do that because he sees further down the road than I do.
Yeah.
Also, this was a common phrase for insurmountable odds or removing difficulty in that time. So he was using a vernacular that they understood. He was not necessarily talking about a literal mountain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's and this is a different way when he talks about the faith the size of a mustard seed, but great things can be done. I mean, think about this literally. Think about a mountain going up into the air and being thrown into the sea. There's nothing physically possible about that, right? There's nothing that we can imagine that could be done. You think the only way a mountain could go into the sea is it's actually be opposite. It's usually a volcano comes up out of the ocean, and it spews lava, and it keeps spewing and spewing and spewing, and then it becomes a mountain in the ocean. But for a mountain to go upside down into the sea, there's just no logical way that could be done. There's nothing about that could happen.
Yeah.
And God says, with faith in God can do that.
Absolutely.
So something completely void of reason or what is likely to happen on earth.
Yeah. Well, it's like he said earlier, what is impossible for man is possible for God, right?
Yeah.
Now, he does also hit some caveats here at the bottom. He says that you also need to forgive to be forgiven, and you need to forgive to have effective prayer. There are other times that Jesus talks about this. We see it in Matthew 6:14 through 15, when he talks about the Lord's Prayer and how to pray, right? So this is a theme that Jesus has, is you need to forgive people who have offended you if you want to have a fruitful prayer life.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you're kind of thinking as if, God's telling him, you have to do this too. This isn't just me. You go back and, you think about the parable of the, I can't think of what it's called, but, the man that had a small debt and the guy forgave it.
Yeah.
And then that guy who was forgiven the debt, he goes out and had an even smaller debt, and he beats him and he has him thrown in jail. And I'm like, wait a minute. I forgave you that, which was way bigger. And you're something that much smaller, and you're this angry about it?
Right.
What? Are you kidding me? Why don't you try that too? And it's something for everyone. Like, yes, God. What God has forgiven is greater than anything we can even imagine. Someone wronging us. There's no even comparison. And so he's not really asking much.
No, he's not. He's not. It's if you're not willing to forgive, then, like as we were talking about, you your prayers need to be aligned with the heart of God.
Yeah.
Well, his heart includes forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not really thinking about what's best for everyone if you're refusing to forgive those who've offended you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up this chapter with verses 27 through 33. And they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple area, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders came to him and began saying to him, "By what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do these things?" But Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question, and you answer me, and then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Answer me." And they began considering the implications among themselves, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, then why did you not believe him? But should we say from men?" They were afraid of the people, for they all considered John to have been a real prophet. Answering Jesus, they said, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither am I telling you by what authority I do these things." So it's kind of fun. First of all, this is the chapter in which Jesus flips the tables, and now here he's turning the tables.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Jesus really did come in and act like he owned the place.
Yeah.
Right? When you think about what he was doing in the temple courtyard, and let's be frank, he does own the place.
Yeah.
It's his temple.
Right.
Right. And so the church leaders challenge him on this, and they're like, "By what authority do you come in here and do this?" And that's when he hits them with what they're always trying to hit him with. And I'm going to ask you a question, and whichever way you answer it, you're going to trap yourself.
Yeah.
And so he says, "Tell me about John the Baptist." And they have to either admit that John the Baptist was a true prophet, knowing that John had stamped his approval on Jesus and knowing what John had taught, or they have to deny John was a prophet and essentially lie because they did believe John was a prophet.
Yeah.
And the people around them believed John was a prophet. So they were going to make people angry.
Right. Yeah. I can't remember where I just saw this or heard this recently. Somebody was talking about how whenever somebody is giving an argument that isn't right or doesn't make sense or is lying or something like that, if you just keep asking questions, it will come out, and every time the Pharisees come to Jesus, and I'd have to go back to make sure and go through this, but it seems like every time the Pharisees come to Jesus, the first thing Jesus asks is a question. It's like, "Okay, will you tell me this?" And because he knows that if he asks enough questions and he as you say, turn the tables, they'll realize that their standing is wrong and that they are in the wrong and that they don't have, they are in the wrong and that Jesus is right and that their attitude of holier than thou is they aren't as holy as Jesus is.
Right. Yeah. Well, ultimately, the issue here is they end up saying, "We can't answer that."
Right.
And the reason they do that is because they weren't ever interested in the truth.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Just as you were saying, like when somebody is raising like a straw argument or a this or that, or there's a motivation behind it.
Yeah.
That if you ask questions, you get to the heart too.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus did, and he got to the heart of it. And the truth is, what they were seeking was not the truth. They were seeking power and authority. That's the whole reason they came out here. They were questioning his authority.
Yeah.
Why? Because they saw themselves as the ones who should have authority.
Yeah.
You're on our land. We're the chief priests of the temple and the scribes.
Yeah.
Who are you to come in here and act like you own the place? We own the place.
Yeah.
And Jesus is quick to remind them, no, you're subletting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're here to serve, not to rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when I was reading this and I read that last sentence, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things." He's almost, so they come to him and ask, "What authority do you have to do this?" And Jesus' reply is almost like saying, "What authority do you have to ask me?"
Yeah.
You're asking what authority I have to do this, but who says that you get to care? Like, what is it up to you? what if I say this or if I say this, it's not up to you anyway. You know, you don't get to decide if I have authority or not.
Yeah.
So what are you even asking for?
Yeah. I can't think of it. Well, I guess a specific example would be I watched Iron Fist. It was like a TV show based on a Marvel comic character, right?
Yeah.
But there are a bunch of shows and movies that follow the same trope of like the person who is in charge shows up at his own building and the security doesn't recognize them and wants to know why they want to be let in.
Yeah.
And why they think they can just go to the elevator and go to the top floor. And it's like, because I own this place.
Because
like,
my name is on the building.
yeah, my name is on the building. And they're like, sure it is, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happening here is they're wanting to exercise that authority. And to your point, Jesus is like, how do you get to have authority over the one who built this temple?
Yeah, and kind of as you're saying there, imagine that, that the CEO of that company, there's an elevator just for the CEO, that goes straight to the penthouse. And he walks in jeans and a T-shirt, and everybody's saying, whoa, what are you doing? Look at you. You don't belong here. Mm-hmm. Look at you. And they don't even realize who he is. But if he pulled up in a limousine with bodyguards and with a fine suit and all that, nobody would probably question him because that's what they expect it to look like. And Jesus isn't what they expected him to look like and act like.
No, what they expected was what they wanted to see.
Right.
And that he would affirm everything that they were doing.
Yeah.
Right. And wow, isn't that exactly what we do today?
Yeah.
We expect Jesus to look this way and he won't correct me, he'll correct you.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not how it's going to be.
Right.
We need to be humble and come to him with humility, like a child maybe.
Yeah.
And be willing to let him exert his authority as opposed to hoping for our own. You know? All right. Well, that's chapter 11. So, we had a long one. Now we had a short one.
Yeah.
But
put them together and it's the length of two normal ones.
That's right. Anything else we need to touch on before we go?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening or watching. We hope you have a great day. We hope you are reading for yourself through the book of Mark, and we will see you next time.